Great. So it looks like we are live. So we'll just take a few minutes to let our online viewers join us. But thanks very much to our in-person audience here at the Siena Art Institute for joining us this evening for our conversation with Hanane Kai, who's one of our current Fall 2022 participants here at the Siena Art Institute. And yes, we have some people starting to join us online since we're live streaming both on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well. I'll just mention to our viewers, both in person and online, that we very much welcome questions or comments, especially in the final part of today's event. We'll have a Q&A, so we very much welcome your contributions to that discussion. But to start things off, it's my pleasure to introduce Hanane Kai, who is not only our speaker this evening, but she also is here for this whole autumn season at the Siena Art Institute, thanks to the contribution of the Regione of Tuscany as a project of the Toscana in Contemporanea 2022, which is supporting young artists engaging in conflict resolution through art and creative practice. Hanane is an artist and an award-winning illustrator who brings a design approach to her art. She's based in her home studio in the mountains of Lebanon, and she has worked with various clients ranging from small publishers to Pearson, the Hatchet Book Group, Facebook, Concern Worldwide, the World Food Programme, and the BBC. She's especially attuned to the role of emotion in visually communicating a message. Hanane's areas of expertise include creative formats for publishing, visualizing sensitive topics for children, and humanitarian storytelling. She's worked on several collaborative projects. For example, her award-winning Amal book series, which was created for children with PTSD, working closely with a team of experts, including a child psychologist. And in today's talk, she'll offer us a glimpse into some of these projects. Hanane's work has been recognized with many awards, including the 2016 Bologna Ragazzi Award in the New Horizons category, the Estilat Arabic Children's Book Award for Best Production, and many more. She was also shortlisted for the World Illustration Awards and the Mahmoud Khalil Awards. And as we get started with today's presentation, I'll just reiterate that we're very glad for this chance to engage in a conversation with our attendees, both in person and online. So our online viewers are welcome to write questions in the comment section, and we'll take some time to respond to you during the Q&A as the final part of this evening's talk. So without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to Hanane.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Watching from Lebanon and the Arab world, مرحبا, اشتقت لكم واشتقت للبنان. So in today's talk, I'm going to be focusing on two things that I do, which is visualizing sensitive topics for children and humanitarian storytelling. Some of other things that I do that I won't be covering in today's talk are portrait illustration, publication design, designing and illustrating educational curriculum. On the topic of visualizing sensitive topics for children, I'm mostly going to talk in this whole presentation about a project called Amal. And Amal in Arabic means hope, and it's also a name of a female, which is here the character to the right. On the left, we have Salim, the protagonist of the story. So Amal is a series of I'll tell you more about Salim, but let me tell you first. Amal is a series of 9 books targeted towards children with PTSD, so children with post-traumatic stress disorder. And each book of the series teaches kids a certain coping mechanism so they can deal better with their stress and the effect of trauma. Salim is a 9-year-old boy who has been through a traumatic event that is not really revealed in the books so that the readers can identify with their own trauma. And through the story of Salim, the readers go through the healing journey that Salim is going through, and hopefully that will become hopefully theirs. So each book is, as I was saying before, covers or gives the child a certain tool to deal with his trauma. The first one, for example, Salim is having panic attacks and he's having anger problems, and he thinks that maybe he's possessed or maybe he is an evil person. And so the book is teaching Salim that you're not an evil person, you're just a normal person. You just have PTSD, and that's normal, and you can get better. So normalizing the case. The second book is about relieving trauma. The third one is about how to have healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries. The fourth one, my favorite book, is about it teaches kids about emotions, how they are like waves. And then from book 5 on, it's more of hands-on technique of breathing techniques, muscle relaxation, blah, blah, blah. And all of that is done in a storytelling way. There's also a treasure hunt that is happening. So there's action, there's humor, and also all of these tools. I'm showing you here the very first spread in book 1. And you can see how I'm using the lines to a way of abstracting trauma and its effect on Salim. And this spread says, this is Salim, basically introducing the character. This is Salim. Salim is a good boy. I don't know how to translate that exactly. He has been through a terrible thing. Yeah. And then this is the second spread of book 2. It's a silent spread, so there are no words, but the implication is that he's leaving his home, he has been misplaced. I'm choosing also to show you this spread from book 1 also because it goes through one day of a life of Salim. And Arabic reads from right to left, and these are 2 pages, so we're going to read it page 1, page 2, and from the right and then to the left. And the spread says, like every night, Salim doesn't sleep well because he has nightmares. He goes to school, he cannot focus on work, on the teacher, what they're saying. He falls asleep sometimes, and he has bad grades. On his way back and to school, he goes through a street that triggers him. And so he either has to take a very long way and arrive late to school, or his sister has to drag him through that way. During recess, he prefers to stay alone. He's very easily triggered by sounds, but he has nice moments sometimes with the cat. And when he's back home, he prefers to sit alone on the rooftop. And this is another view of Salim being alone on the rooftop. Talking about POV with Jeff, the high angle camera view. And his sister is calling him here for lunch. A little bit of backstory into that whole project. According to a report published by UNICEF in 2018-19, almost 14 million children are suffering hardship and trauma due to war. And this was in 2019. I cannot imagine what the numbers are like now after the war in Ukraine and the Beirut blast. And yeah. In that same report, it said that prolonged exposure for children to war and uncertainty can lead to toxic stress. And if that is left unresolved, it can have detrimental effect on the physical well-being and emotional well-being of children. So seeing the problem in hand, the publishers, Jabal Amman Publishing, got together with Dr. Aysam Smair, who's a psychotherapist, and a writer, Luma Azar, and me as an illustrator to create these books. And it's worth mentioning, and also because the whole books are based on the method of Dr. Aysam, that Dr. Aysam is a professional counselor who specializes in trauma treatment for refugees, victims of torture, and several abused and neglected children. He has worked for several years in refugee camps with children. and he developed methods based on narrative exposure therapy that are later used in the books. That's one spread also from book one, where Salim is having a traumatic reaction from the bell ring that we can see to the right. In terms of character designs and the spaces, I'm not going to talk about design so much, but more about their the therapy side of it. That in each space, the characters are designed in a way for Salim to have in each of the three spaces: family, school, neighborhood, an element of humor and an element of emotional support. Because both of them are important for healing. We shouldn't forget humor also. And of course, you have the two bullies at school that we need to have some pressure points in the story. In terms of character design, Amal, the therapist of Salim, was almost the character that went through the most changes. She started as someone who's very young and approachable, but we wanted her to be more mature. Her hair was too loose, so we wanted something more culturally appropriate. Since these books are at first going to be published in the Arab world, these are some of the iterations we went through until we went with the one on the top to the right. And this is book 4, my favorite book from the whole series. And if we had time by the end of the presentation, I'll show you the book. But for now, so the books end with a page that summarizes each book. So there's a lesson through the book, and then they end with pages like these. And I'm going to take you through the last page of each book as a journey, because them by themselves also are a journey that represents the journey of the books also. Okay, can someone tell me what message do they get? No? Yeah.
It feels like the same context that he's changing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the point, that he is getting better, but the trauma is not going away. So the message is that trauma is still here, but not only it is still here, he's kind of making use of it and turning it into something positive somehow. Yeah, in terms of coloring technique, these are some of the trials that I did before we chose the last one. I think the one on the left on the top was the one that was the closest to what I wanted, but not really exactly. Here are more trials, several different techniques. Some are digital, some are not. Here are some digital ones. By the way, the one on the bottom to the left is digital. These are by hand until we got to this one, which I thought, and I still think that it was the most expressive one between the ones that I tried, because I really wanted the coloring technique also to be expressive, but also I wanted to be able to show the dichotomy of Salim, the person that we see from the outside as a normal person maybe, but he's actually having these thoughts in his head and the insecurities, all the racing insecurities in his mind. So there's this dichotomy, and I wanted the coloring technique to be rough and defined at the same time. And so here to the left, you can see how the same coloring technique can show a lot of roughness, but to the right side also it's soothing and refined. more examples of these two that like I cannot separate them so much, but they're kind of together in the same spread, the rough and the refined. That's my favorite spread, absolutely, from all the books. A very happy spread. So here, this is to say that I worked on so many illustrations, and this is not all of them. This is even less than half, and I couldn't have done all of that alone. So I want to thank Mariela Geppe from Mexico, and she's my assistant who helps me with the hand coloring of the illustrations, and Maya Haii from Lebanon, who helps me with the digital part of the illustrations. I've already mentioned Dr. Isam, Lama Azar, and Jabal Amman Publishing. I'm going to move to another project, which is Children in Our World. It's a series. I'm going to show you a video. It's a series published by Ashet, and it's about refugees and migrants, racism and intolerance, poverty and hunger, global conflict. And the 4 books come together to form that globe, to reflect on the name of the series, Children in Our World. And it's also a vicious cycle where when we start with global conflict, war, it can lead to a refugee crisis like we're seeing today. And this leads to poverty, and then this leads to racism, and then back into global conflict. And it's a vicious cycle that unfortunately we're living today also. Based on the success of that first series of 4 books, Ashed decided to go for another series of 4 books. And some of the topics are rights and equality, culture and diversity, protecting the planet, and my least favorites, rules and responsibilities. And it was painful to work on that book, I have to say, because I'm rebellious at heart. And I did push a lot the publishers to have somewhere where they're teaching kids also that yes, rules exist, but we don't need to follow them, and sometimes it's better if we don't. But it wasn't the plan of the publishers, so I did work on it anyways. These are a few spreads from the books, and I think that for this spread I had a picture taken in Perugia in Italy. Can you recognize a little bit the streets of Italy, or no, it's only in my mind? I think this one is from diversity and culture and diversity. This spread would be for sure from culture and diversity. This one too. This is from protecting the planet. And you're getting a sneak peek into a book which I almost just started at because the publishers decided to go for yet another series of 4 books. But for now, we're going only with one after the events of COVID. We did a small survey, and a lot of the responses of people asking mothers and other people, what would they like to hear about? What do they want their children to know about? And they said, some of the suggestions were about death and grief after everything that happened during COVID. I'm moving to another department, which is humanitarian story.
With that book, Death and Grief, did you contribute also to the text?
No, just I did contribute to the small survey that we did to figure out what do people want to hear about, what is needed, what are topics that are hard to explain to children about. If they're hearing some things on the news and they don't understand what the news is about, how can you explain it to them? And so these books, this is somehow what the books are for. Onto humanitarian storytelling. This is a project I did back in 2014 where me and a journalist from the US called Masha Hamilton, we went to north of Lebanon and Halba, and we spoke with 6 women from Syria, and they told us about stories from their lives. Some of them were stories about their trip from Syria to Lebanon, and some were unrelated to war or their trip. But here with this woman, Fida, when we were talking to her, Masha was, before I go on, Masha was documenting the stories of these women by writing, and I was documenting them by illustrating. And when we were talking to Fida, she had this box that she brought to us, and she opened it, and it was filled with very random objects that you would wonder why she's keeping them. And she pulled out this box of cigarettes, and this was the first box of cigarette that her brother gave her, which would be like a decade ago, would have been then a decade ago, and she kept it. Her brother obviously died during war in Syria, and she still has the Kent box. This is one of the other stories. And basically, this woman fled her house very, very quickly, and she couldn't take anything with her from her house. And so the day after, she knew that her house was destroyed, and she was thinking, should I go back? Should I not go back? And then she couldn't bear the thought of not going back and taking a peek at the house before she's going to disappear forever. And she goes to the house, and she chooses to take with her back this wall clock, and she tells us that there was gold in her house, there was some silver, there was other valuables, but for her she chose this wall clock because it had some emotional value for her. And so she picked it up and she went back to her trip to Lebanon, and she never came back. Onto another department from my work, personal projects. This is an illustration I did back in, not so way back, well, in May 2021, when the world was hearing about what's going on in Palestine with Sheikh Jarrah and the Gaza Strip. I read report from Save the Children that was saying that almost 500 children get in touch with the Israeli military detention system, 500 per year. And 80% of the charges against children is for throwing rocks. And the punishment for that is 20 years for throwing rocks. And the children who get detained, 50% of them don't go back, don't end up going back to school. And all of them report that it was a life-changing experience. So I was struck by the numbers, and the report goes on and on. This is what I remember from it for now, but it had even more staggering information. So I was struck to do this illustration of this boy, and of course using the olive branch. And for those of you who don't know, olive trees are a sensation, or like such a symbol for Palestine and Palestinians. Like if your stomach is hurting and you're next to a Palestinian person, probably they rub you with olive oil. It's the solution for everything. It's olive oil. Also, during the same phase, a month after, I did this poster in collaboration with Christian Serkis. Christian did the lettering on the bottom, which reads Palestine, which means Palestine. And I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's very much telling of what's happening, such a symbol of what's happening right now in Palestine. And it's worth mentioning also that I got inspired by the visuals of the posters of the 70s and 80s. Palestinian artists where everything is inside the box. So you can see that the olive tree is not bleeding outside. And in these posters, for example, sometimes you see a person who's holding their hand up, but if the hand is gonna go out of the poster, then the hand will be distorted, like with no regard to the anatomy, but it's beautiful, like in a very beautiful way. So that's where the idea of framing that thing came from. That's a visual I did for August 4th for the Beirut blast, a year after the Beirut blast. And if you were familiar a little bit or have seen pictures, you've probably seen shattered glass everywhere. And so I got inspired by the visual of the shattered glass, and I used it to also reflect the word Beirut. So the lettering reads Beirut. Yeah, and the lettering is by Christian Serkis. This is a piece I did as a tribute for Sarah Hijazi in June 2020. The story of Sarah Hijazi is that she's a queer feminist activist, Egyptian lady who got imprisoned for holding up rainbow flag in one of the concerts of Mashroua Leila. She got imprisoned for 2 years, I think, and no, actually not 2 years, sorry, scratch that. She got imprisoned for I don't know how long. She was tortured, and then when she was released, she asked for exile. She went to Canada, and in Canada she suffered from depression and loneliness, and then she ended her life. She committed suicide in June 2020. She left a letter that reads, "To my siblings, I tried to survive and I failed. Forgive me. To my friends, the experience was harsh and I am too weak to resist it. Forgive me. To the world, you were cruel to a great extent, but I forgive." And the piece is only the last part, which is "To the world," written in Arabic, the original form it was written in, and the lettering is by Christian Serkis. And with the words of Sarah Hijazi, I'm going to end this presentation. Thank you for watching. If there's any time, we can go back to...
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we certainly have some time for questions. I know I have a ton of questions, but we can also talk afterwards. So from the audience, though, if there might be some questions from our viewers, either online, if you want to write in the comments any questions, but also in our in-person audience, if there's any questions that come to mind or just comments in general.
You can also go through book 4 if there's time for it. If you want to see, but also if you want to go for questions.
Yeah, there's a question from up here in front. If you.
I was just wondering if you see yourself as having a pedagogy really for teaching. Do you hope to instruct through compassion or by entertaining, or do you just want to like do the best you can to make something that would move you and then let the chips fall where they may? What's your sort of
that would move me, but not what?
And then just let it when it hits the market.
I wouldn't go into pedagogy, but for sure my work tends to go, or I like it to go towards social causes and like mental health stuff, LGBTQ plus rights, these things. But I don't see myself teaching, I think. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you for
Sure.
your presentation. I'm curious to know which is the best platform for you about illustration. I mean, can we see also print everywhere in the wall, or it's the best for you online?
To see my work.
Yeah,
Mm.
you're speaking about to do something in memory or to some topic.
Like for these posters, for
For this
example.
or for the tree, olive tree,
Yeah,
for example, where is the best place for your visually? I mean,
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I did publish them online at first, and I did them for being published online. But this poster, for example, is printed and hang on in the houses of several people. Um, there are some of them that I see as posters, but a lot of them also it's just that there are reactions, like something happens that the region is really talking about it a lot and it moves a lot of people. And then my response is to create a visual, and my first instinct is to publish it online. Of course, I would love to see them printed. This one, for example, is really nice when printed.
I could see it as a poster, but
Yeah.
also just with the outline as a stamp.
As a stamp.
You know, I think so two very different
Yeah.
scales, but I think
Yeah,
interesting in both ways.
yeah.
I was interested in learning a bit more about the experience of you working with a psychologist on those different series. How much margin were you given when you were working with them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they give you a sort of guideline, and then they were happy for you to adjust that guideline? And then
Yeah. Yeah, so the team is fantastic, I have to say, and the psychologist is very resourceful and knowledgeable in what he's doing, and the publishers also, which who are the link between me and all the other team members, have done a really good job. For example, to introduce me to the project, we had several workshops. And I did the same with the writer also, because the idea is the idea of the psychologist, but then they had someone write the stories. And in terms of margin, and because it's a subject that I'm passionate about, a lot of the times I receive the text and I see that it's not working, and I bring it back to the publisher, pointing out a few things. I can remember, for example, in a very tricky book, which is book uh, book 7, thought stopping. And thought stopping could very easily be toxic positivity. So you get a negative idea and you have to be stop, literally, and you hold like this is the exercise. But what if someone beats you? Like, you don't need that thought to stop you. On the contrary, you need to talk about it. But what so it's like a very thin line between knowing what are the thoughts that we need to stop and what are the healthy negative thoughts, because these also exist. And so the story was set in a way that it had some toxic positivity, and I go back to the publisher and they thanked me for pointing it out, and then they changed the story and blah blah blah. And in other stories, this is one of the things that I remember. In other stories, my intervention would be that this wouldn't work visually, or we don't need to be saying that by words, because I can say it by illustrating it. For example, I feel that the second spread of the book is very powerful. It's a silent spread, but it says a lot. He's leaving his house. He's sad in the truck with his hand on the. I mean, it doesn't need any text. So these were the kinds of interactions we had with, yeah.
So has a psychiatrist worked with children, like in particular, through these books? And have you, I'm just curious about the actual on the ground feedback that you've gotten
Yeah.
from kids, or what you've done with kids through the books.
Yeah, So the books are not printed yet. I know. I've been dying to see them printed, but book one was piloted, and that's how they decided to go with the series. Also, to answer your question, all of the lessons and the exercises that are in the books have been exercises that Dr. Aysam have been doing for years and years with children in refugee camps. He toured the world. I was reading, like, I don't remember all the countries he's been, but he's worked a bunch with children in refugee camps using these methods. Yeah. Jeff.
For outstanding work.
Thank you.
So, two questions.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut it down to two. One is, could you, any of the beautiful pictures that we've seen, how many drafts did you go through?
Oh my
before
God.
you reached that?
Oh my God. You don't want to know.
And then the other question for you is, for example, this series where there are the 4 books and the covers put together. create,
Yeah.
The globe. Was that your, it's a very visual idea, the connection between it, was that your idea?
Yeah, that's my idea. Yeah, because so when I get my briefs, and sometimes it's my clue for creativity, I ask what is this book really about? So this is where, like, you can tell how with my thinking I went into, okay, I want the books to come together. At first I was going to put them next to each other. These books, by the way, come together also, but these were done way after I had done the previous books. And because this publisher saw what I've done for the other publishers, so they asked for that idea, I was against it. But there's a message. It's because Salim is going through a journey here. And so we see the books coming together, and you can see the white roads that continue from one book to the other. Yeah, and for a little bit of process, a little bit of it, I go through a lot of iterations, especially at the very first stage of the illustration, which is the storyboarding. So I do a storyboard of the whole book. Very drafty, like this one. And at this stage is the stage where the most changes happen, because from this stage until it's colored, I can almost see the colored one. But from here, is it really the camera angle that I want? Do I want it to be, do I want to divide the page differently? So from this one comes a better sketch, and then the light and shadow study, like where's the light coming from and why? And the final colored one. Here's another example. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the technique of hand coloring? Because the very fine lines are done by hand with your Mexican collaborator, is that right? And you were saying that to you it evokes sort of a soothing sensation.
Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because to me, I understand that also that the eye sort of follows these lines almost. I think of Zen gardens that have similar line qualities that can become meditative. But at the same time, there's a tension there because it's very busy with lots of lines, as opposed to if it was just a hazy, soft, or sort of a solid pastel color. So instead, there's lots of little lines which add some visual tension, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my research through the many coloring techniques that I tried was to find something really expressive. So I hope I did a good job with the expressiveness of the lines, and then using the lines also to portray trauma and
We've got some really nice comments that have come in from online viewers. There was just one example, a comment that says full of hope and many things to learn. So lots of positivity coming from our online viewers. I don't know if there were other final questions before we turn to some refreshments that we have outside so we can continue the conversation with our in-person audience. But yes.
You did allude to the book. I was wondering if you could just
tell us more.
Why is that?
So, can I walk you through the book? This is the book. It is my favorite because it's set next to the sea, and so I got to work a lot with the lines of the sea. But it also because of its message, and the message is like emotions are like waves. So, would you like me to go through it? Okay. A little bit of background. I told you before that there's also a treasure hunt that is happening in the books. So here they got a certain riddle in their hands, and Salim and his friends are in the neighborhood. They're trying to decipher this riddle, and then one of them is like, "Let's go have ice cream." And they go to the ice cream shop. The owner of the ice cream shop is called Abu Draid. And they notice at some point on the wall of Abu Draid a photo of him fishing in a boat. And they're curious about it. They ask him, he gets weird about it. So they take their ice cream, they're happy with it, but at the same time, they're like, what just happened? Why was he so weird? And then they see him closing his shop, and he takes his oud, which is the guitar version, the Arabic guitar version, and they follow him. So we see them following him secretly and looking at their riddle, and he leads them all the way to the sea. And he sees them, and he's like, hey, come here. And he tells them, do you see this boat over there? And they say, yes. They tell them, well, this boat was once mine. And I used to go on fishing trips with your dad, Salim. So he was friends with Salim's dad. But one day there was a terrible storm, and Abu Draid was drowning, and he thought that he was going to die. But then Salim's father comes and he rescues him. And Salim's like, really? My father? His father is dead, so he doesn't know a lot about him. He's ecstatic to know anything about his father. And Abu Draid tells him more, and then he explains that for a long time after that incident, Abu Draid would be afraid to go to the sea, because then he's reminded by that incident. And then he learned bit by bit to overcome that fear. And Salim starts to remember his own trauma and his own moments where he felt that he cannot control himself, for example, here, or before there was another scene, like when he was extremely afraid of an ambulance passing by. And the spread explains the idea of that emotions are like waves. Sometimes they are really big and they engulf us, and sometimes they are small and easier on us and easier to take. And we see here the four kids looking at the sea, contemplating on that idea. And the sea doesn't just have big waves and small waves. Sometimes also it was a point to stress on that if some waves are going into this direction, some in that, and another direction, some are going towards the camera, some are going elsewhere. And so all sorts of emotions and with all kinds of intensities. And this spread is very important because also plays on the idea of that, how Abu Draid not just overcame his trauma, but he used it in a constructive way. So he's riding the wave, which is his own trauma, a very symbolic spread. And also the spread is very important to me. It kind of reminds me of my own imposter syndrome, for example. And so a lot of people ask me, how do how do you not have imposter syndrome? I'm like, of course I have imposter syndrome. I have it every day. I've been working for 17 years and I still have imposter syndrome, but the only thing that I'm better at is at existing with the imposter syndrome, existing with the thoughts, because the thoughts are never going away. I just manage them better and I don't give them a lot of importance. I don't let them take over. Yeah, so that's almost the same idea of riding the wave. Here, Abu Draid gives Salim a compass that used to belong to his father. The kids go on with their search for the treasure hunt. They find another clue and they go back home singing happy. And that's the last spread that we already went through. So yeah, thank you for listening. Yeah.
Sure. Maybe you talk about this subject at the beginning when I was not there. But I would like to ask you, how did you arrive to join this like sweet universe of children cartoons?
Yeah.
The idea of something really painful as the war and trauma.
I wish I know, but it has become very quickly my specialty to be illustrating difficult subjects for children. It's also because when I have a lot of projects and that present themselves to me, I usually choose the one that is social, has a social cause. So I found myself obviously turning more into these books that have difficult subjects to portray for kids. Yeah.
But the very beautiful drawing with the lady and the king
Yeah.
cigarettes, that's not for children. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
There's another comment that came in, well, several comments was very positive from our online viewers. We have Jackie was saying, so powerful your illustrations and interesting to hear about your work process. So lots of good feedback there. But I guess in the interest of time, maybe we'll wrap up for now and our in-person audience can enjoy some refreshments. I'll just mention, looking ahead in our calendar, we'll have the chance to hear from our current, our very recently arrived resident artist, Sherry Simons, who's also with us in person here in our audience tonight. So she'll be leading an artist talk Tuesday, October 25th. At 6 p.m. this same time. In between, we'll have next Tuesday a special workshop that's connected to this initiative of the Region of Tuscany for the Toscana in Contemporanea project that's supporting young artists engaging in conflict resolution through creative practice. So we'll be hosting an interactive workshop in exploring nonviolence with the Greek educator and designer and permaculture facilitator, Christos Karinstinos. So that'll be our special activity next Tuesday. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. But certainly, we really encourage you to check out more of Hanane's work also online. She has her website, which is just hanane.me, or you can find her on Instagram at Hanane Kai. Because she's only shown us a small portion of her vast repertoire of work. She mentioned, for example, her portraiture work, which is a whole other very impressive body of work, as well as many other initiatives that she's engaged on. So you can find out a lot more about that online, or we can talk with her in person over some refreshments. So thank you so much, Hanane, for sharing with us this glimpse into your work. It's been really lovely. And thanks to our audience for joining us, both online and in person. So, grazie.